A poor little girl finds a bicycle in the trash and approaches a young billionaire in the park. All children have a dad who teaches them. Can you be my dad just for today? What happens next is unbelievable. Ellie opened her eyes while it was still dark. She didn't have a watch, but she knew it was too early for most people. They were still asleep in their warm beds, while she stretched on the cardboard she called a bed. The early morning cold bit through the old coat she used for sleeping. It was too big for her, but at least it kept her warm. Ellie got up slowly, folding the cardboard and hiding it behind a dumpster. If someone took it, she'd have to sleep on the hard ground again. Her stomach rumbled. She hadn't eaten properly in 2 nights. Yesterday, she had only managed to get half a sandwich someone had thrown away, but it was still good. Today, she needed to find something better. Ellie walked through the empty streets. She liked this time of day because no one yelled at her to get out or called the police. She could walk without hiding, almost as if she belonged there too. She reached the alley where she always looked for useful things. It was behind a small restaurant, and sometimes the owner threw out food that was still edible. Today there was nothing by the back door, so she went straight for the trash bags. The first bag only had dirty napkins and rotten leftovers. The second one smelled way too bad. Ellie made a face and moved on to the next one. Her small fingers worked quickly, sorting through what was good and what wasn't. In the fourth bag, her fingers touched something different. It wasn't soft like food or hard like a can. It was cold metal. Ellie pulled it out carefully, and her eyes widened. A bicycle. It was small, just the right size for her. The red paint was peeling and there was rust everywhere, but it was a real bicycle. Ellie ran her hand over the handlebars, feeling every scratch and mark. It had pedals. They were rusty and a bit stiff, but they were there. The seat was torn in a few places, letting the yellow foam show through. The wheels had rust spots, but they turned. It was a real, complete bicycle. Ellie hugged the handlebars to her chest. She had never owned a toy. Nothing. Sometimes she found broken pieces in the trash, a doll's arm, toy car wheels without the rest of the car, loose puzzle pieces, but never something whole and something that worked, something that was all hers. This bicycle was different. It had everything. Handlebars to hold, pedals to push, wheels to ride. It was like the toys she saw other kids using in the park. Ellie pushed the bicycle out of the alley. The wheels made a strange, creaky noise, but they turned. She had to walk on her tiptoes to reach the handlebars properly, but she could push it down the street. As she walked, her head filled with ideas. Now she had a bicycle like the other kids. She could go to the park and play like them. Maybe she could even talk to a kid her age. She imagined what it would be like to arrive at the park riding it. The other kids would look and think, "Look, a girl with a bike just like ours." They wouldn't see a street kid. They would just see a normal kid with a normal toy. Ellie passed a bakery that was just opening. The smell of fresh bread made her stomach rumble, but today she didn't mind as much. She was too busy dreaming about her bicycle. She imagined racing with other kids. She would pedal fast in the wind, messing up her hair, laughing out loud like she saw other kids do. Maybe she would even win a few races. Maybe the other kids would think she was cool. The way to the park was full of hills. Ellie had to stop several times to rest. The bike wasn't heavy, but her 6-year-old legs got tired. During one of her stops, she sat on the sidewalk and tested the pedals with her hands. They turned, slowly and noisily, but they turned. Ellie smiled so wide her cheeks hurt. It was real. She was going to be able to ride it for real. She looked at the houses around her. Through the windows, she saw children having breakfast with their families. Some had bikes leaning against the garage, new, shiny bikes. But now Ellie had one too. Maybe it wasn't new or shiny, but it worked. She imagined what it would be like if one of those kids saw her in the park. Maybe they would say, "You want to ride bikes with us?" Ellie would have to answer, "Sure," and ride off with them. Maybe they would even invite her to play at their houses. She could see the rooms full of toys she always imagined. She might even get to stay for dinner with a real family. Ellie stood up, excited by all these possibilities. She continued pushing the bike, now paying attention to every detail. The peeling paint formed interesting patterns. The rusty pedals had grooves her small feet could use. The handlebars were at the perfect height for her. She passed an elementary school that was still closed. In the yard, she saw several small bicycles leaning against the fence. Soon, the children would arrive for another day of school. Ellie imagined what it would be like to arrive at school on her bike, lean it next to the others, and go inside to learn new things. But that was too big of a dream, for now just having the bicycle was more than she could believe. She finally reached the park. It was empty, as it always was in the early morning. Ellie pushed the bike to her favorite bench, a wooden bench under a big tree. She left the bicycle right beside her and sat down. She touched every part of it carefully, as if it were the most valuable treasure in the world. And it was. To her, it was the greatest treasure that existed. She tested the pedals with her hands again. They turned better now, as if they were getting used to moving. The seat was at the right height for her. If she could get on and balance, she could actually ride it. Ellie looked around the empty park and imagined how different it would be when other children arrived. They would bring balls, jump ropes, scooters, and bicycles. And now she would have something to bring too. She imagined a girl her age arriving at the park and seeing her bike. The girl would say, "That's cool, do you want to be my friend?" And Ellie would answer, "Yes." Then they would play together all day. Or maybe a group of kids would be racing. They would look at Ellie and say, "You have a bike. Come race with us." And she would, pedaling as fast as she could. Ellie hugged the bike to her chest and closed her eyes. For the first time in her life, she had something that made her just like the other kids. She wasn't just a street kid that people ignored. She was a girl with a bike, a girl who could play. When she opened her eyes, the sun was rising, painting everything in gold. The park looked beautiful, and Ellie felt like a part of it. She was no longer just someone who came here to hide. She was someone who came here to play. Her bicycle was there, with its rusty but working pedals, its torn but comfortable seat, its stained but turning wheels. It was hers. And that changed everything. Now she was a real kid, a kid who had toys, who could make friends, who belonged somewhere. And it all started with a treasure found in the trash. The sun was already high when Dominic arrived at the park. He hadn't slept well the night before. Once again, work had consumed his mind until late dusk, and when he finally went to bed, he stared at the ceiling for hours. At 35, Dominic had a life that many envied. A large apartment, a new car, a well-paying job. But in the morning, when he woke up, he felt an emptiness he couldn't explain. It was as if something important was missing, but he didn't know what. He decided to go for a walk. The park had always been his favorite place to think. It was quiet, far from the city noise. He chose a bench under a large tree and sat down with the newspaper he had bought on the way. He opened the front page, but the words seemed jumbled. He tried to read about politics, the economy, sports. Nothing held his attention. His thoughts always returned to the same thing. What was he doing with his life? He had grown up dreaming of a family. He wanted to be a father, to teach a child to ride a bike, to play catch in the yard, to help with homework. But his relationships never worked out. The women he met just wanted fun or were interested in his money. The silence of the park was heavy. It wasn't a comfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that made loneliness hurt more. Dominic folded the newspaper and rested his elbows on his knees, staring at the ground. That's when he heard a strange noise. It sounded like metal grinding against metal. He looked up and saw a small girl pushing an old bicycle. The bike was in terrible shape, all rusty with peeling paint. The girl also looked like she had seen better days. Her clothes were dirty and much too big for her. Ellie had seen the man on the bench when she arrived at the park. He looked sad, staring at the newspaper without really reading it. She watched him from a distance, pushing her bike slowly, trying to decide what to do. All morning, she had tried to ride the bike by herself. She would get on the seat, try to reach the pedals, but she always lost her balance and had to put her feet on the ground. It was frustrating. She saw other children pedaling with ease, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. Why was it so hard for her? She watched the man for a few more minutes. He didn't seem dangerous. In fact, he looked lonely, like her. Maybe he would understand what it was like to have no one. Ellie took a deep breath. She had never spoken to a strange adult, but something about that man made her feel she could trust him. She pushed the bike in his direction, her heart pounding. Dominic noticed when the girl approached. She walked slowly, as if unsure of what she wanted to do. When she got close enough, he could see she was very young, maybe 6 years old. She had messy brown hair and big eyes that seemed to hold many stories. "Excuse me," Ellie said, her voice so quiet he almost didn't hear it. Dominic folded his newspaper and gave her his full attention. "Hi," he replied, trying to sound kind. "Is everything okay?" Ellie shuffled her feet nervously. The words she wanted to say seemed stuck in her throat. She looked at the man, then at the bike, then at the ground. "Sisa, I wanted to ask something," she finally managed to say. "You can ask." Ellie bit her lip. What she was about to say was strange, and he would probably say no, but she had to try. "All children have a dad who teaches them," she began, staring intently at her own feet. "Can you be my dad just for today?" The words came out in a rush, as if she were afraid of changing her mind mid-sentence. Dominic was speechless. He hadn't expected that. He looked at the girl, who was now blushing and looked like she wanted to disappear. 1,000 questions ran through his mind. Where were her parents? Why was she alone? What was a child doing in the park with no one to look after her? But when he looked into Ellie's eyes, he saw something that touched him deeply. It was the same loneliness he felt, only magnified 100 times. It was the look of someone who was completely lost in the world. "Why do you want me to be your dad for today?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. Ellie pointed to the bicycle. "I found it this morning," as she said. "I want to learn how to ride it, but I can't do it alone. I've seen other kids in the park. They always have someone to hold the bike until they learn." Dominic looked at the old bike. It was in terrible condition, but it still worked. He imagined the little girl trying to ride it alone, falling over and over, getting up and trying again. The thought saddened him. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ellie." "I'm Dominic." He was silent for a moment, thinking. He knew nothing about this girl, but something inside him told him to help. "Okay, Ellie. I can be your dad for today." Ellie's eyes lit up as if someone had switched on a light inside them. "Really? Really?" She smiled for the first time since she arrived at the park. It was a small, shy but sincere smile. "You want to learn to ride a bike?" Dominic asked, getting up from the bench. Ellie nodded eagerly. She pushed the bike to a flatter area of the park, away from the benches and trees. Dominic followed her, trying to process what was happening. "Have you tried riding before?" he asked. "I tried this morning," Ellie admitted, "but I always fall." "That's normal. Everyone falls at the beginning. Even I fell a lot when I was little." Ellie looked at him, curious. "You had to learn too?" "Of course. No one is born knowing how to ride a bike. My dad taught me when I was about your age." Dominic stopped talking, realizing what he had said. His dad. He hadn't thought about that day in years. He remembered the large, steady hands holding the bike, the encouraging voice telling him he could do it. "So's your dad still alive?" Ellie asked. "No. He passed away when I was a teenager." "I don't have a dad," Ellie said simply, "or a mom." Dominic felt his heart ache. He didn't ask any more questions. He didn't want to force the girl to talk about things that obviously hurt her. "Well, let's get started then," he said, changing the subject. First, you need to get on the bike. I'll hold it so you don't fall." Ellie approached the bike. It was the right size for her, but it still seemed big and intimidating. She put her hands on the handlebars and tried to swing her leg over the seat. Dominic held the bike steady as she settled herself. Her small hands could barely reach the grips properly, and her feet struggled to reach the pedals. "I'm holding on tight," he said. "I won't let you fall." Ellie nodded, but he could feel that she was tense. Every muscle in her body seemed clenched. "Relax," Dominic said. "If you're stiff like that, it will be harder to balance." "I'm scared," Ellie confessed. "So I know. I was scared too when I learned. It's normal." Dominic held the back of the seat with one hand and placed the other on Ellie's back. I'm going to count to 3 and you'll start pedaling slowly. Remember, I'm not going to let go. I promise. Ellie took a deep breath. 1, 2, 3. She started to pedal. The bike moved forward slowly, wobbling from side to side. Dominic ran alongside, keeping his hands steady, helping her balance. That's it. You're doing great, he said encouragingly. Ellie was concentrating so hard, she was barely breathing. The handlebars seemed to have a mind of their own, wanting to go every which way but forward. Look where you want to go, not at the ground, Dominic instructed. The bike goes where you look. They did this a few times. Dominic ran alongside, holding on tight, while Ellie pedaled a few feet before losing her balance and having to stop. With each attempt, she became a little less tense. She began to understand how balance worked, how to use the handlebars to steer. Can I try going a little faster? She asked after the 5th try. Of course, remember, I'm right here, I won't let you fall. This time, Ellie pedaled with more confidence. The bike gained speed, and Dominic had to run faster to keep up. Suddenly, he realized she was balancing on her own. His hands were still on her back, but he was no longer holding her weight. Without Ellie noticing, Dominic loosened his grip. She kept pedaling, focused on what was ahead. 10 feet, 15 feet. When she finally realized she was riding all by herself, Ellie shouted with joy, "I did it! I did it!" She let out a laugh, so spontaneous, so full of pure happiness, that Dominic felt different. It was as if that sound had awakened something inside him that had been dormant for years. He almost felt at peace, something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Ellie managed to pedal a few more feet before losing her balance and having to stop. But she didn't care. She had done it. She had really managed to ride a bike. "Did you see?" she asked, her eyes shining with excitement. "I rode by myself. I saw. It was amazing," Dominic said, smiling in a way he hadn't in years. They spent the next hour practicing. Ellie got better and better. She could go farther, make turns, even stop without falling. Dominic ran alongside, shouting instructions and praise. He couldn't remember the last time he had so much fun. Seeing Ellie's genuine happiness was contagious. Every time she accomplished something new, he felt proud, as if he were really her father. When the sun started to get lower, Ellie stopped pedaling and got off the bike. She was sweaty and her cheeks were red, but she was happier than Dominic had ever seen anyone. They sat on the grass, near the tree where it all began. Ellie was silent for a moment, playing with the grass with her fingers. Then she lowered her head and said something almost inaudible. "I'm hungry." Dominic looked at her. It was almost dinner time, and they had spent the whole afternoon playing. Ellie probably hadn't eaten anything all day. "Do you want me to buy you something to eat?" he asked. Ellie looked up, surprised, as if she couldn't believe someone would do that for her. "Can you?" "Of course." Dominic stood up and looked around. There was a small diner across the street, facing the park. It was nothing fancy, but it looked clean. "Stay here with the bike. I'll be right back." He crossed the street and went into the diner. He ordered a simple ham and cheese sandwich, an apple, and an orange juice. He didn't know what Ellie liked, but he figured any food would be welcome. When he returned, he found her exactly where he had left her, sitting next to the bike. She was holding the handlebars as if she were afraid someone would take it away. "Here," he said, handing her the bag with the food. Ellie opened the wrapper slowly, as if it were something precious. When she saw the sandwich, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat on the grass. Dominic watched as Ellie ate. She chewed slowly, savoring every bite as if she didn't want it to end. It was clear she was very hungry, but she controlled herself, making the food last as long as possible. They didn't talk much during the meal. Dominic didn't want to ask questions that might embarrass her. It was obvious that Ellie was in a difficult situation, but he didn't know how to approach the subject. When she finished eating, the sun was setting, the park was golden with the afternoon light, and the first stars began to appear in the sky. Ellie stood up and picked up the bike. For a moment, Dominic thought she was going to suggest another ride. But instead, She looked at him with shining eyes. "Thank you for today," she said. "It was really nice." There was so much meaning in those simple words. Dominic realized that this day had been special for him too. It had been years since he felt useful, since he felt his presence made a difference in someone's life. "Thank you too, Ellie. I had a lot of fun." She smiled and started pushing the bike toward the street. Dominic stood still, watching her walk away. He wanted to say something, to ask where she lived, if she would be okay, if they could meet again the next day. But the words didn't come. He just stood there, watching Ellie and her rusty bike disappear down the street, taking a part of him with her that he didn't know existed. The park fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was no longer empty. It was filled with memories of laughter, of a little girl learning to ride a bike, of a day that had changed something fundamental inside him. Dominic got up from the bench and started walking home, but he knew he would be back the next day. He had a strange feeling that his life had just changed forever. Dominic opened the door to his apartment and turned on the lights. Everything was exactly as he had left it that morning. Clean, organized, quiet, too quiet. He tossed his keys on the entryway table and went straight to the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator but wasn't hungry. He closed it again without taking anything. He went to the living room and turned on the television, but the noise bothered him. He turned it off immediately. He sat on the couch and looked around. The apartment was beautiful, with everything he needed. Expensive furniture, a large TV, a beautiful view of the city, but suddenly it felt too empty, as if it lacked life inside. Dominic got up and went to take a shower. He stood under the hot water for a long time, trying to relax, but his mind wouldn't stop. It always went back to the same place. The park, a little girl, a rusty bicycle. When he got out of the shower, it was already dark outside. He put on his pajamas and lay down in bed. He closed his eyes, waiting for sleep to come. But instead, he heard it again. Ellie's laugh. It was as if she were right there in the room with him. That pure sound of happiness that had done something strange to his chest. Dominic opened his eyes and stared at the dark ceiling. He couldn't stop thinking about her, about the courage she had to approach a stranger, about the question she asked. "Can you be my dad just for today?" The words had been like a punch to the gut. All children have a dad who teaches them. Dominic turned on his side. He remembered how she held the bicycle so carefully, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. And it probably was. A girl who clearly had nothing, treating an old bike like a treasure. Where was she now? Did she have a home to go to, a warm bed, someone to take care of her? Dominic got up and went to the window. Down below, the city glittered with thousands of lights. Somewhere amidst it all, Ellie was spending the night. Alone. He went back to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. He tossed and turned, trying to forget the day, but it was impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, the big eyes asking for help, the smile when she managed to ride on her own. Suddenly, without warning, other memories began to surface. Memories Dominic had locked away a long time ago, himself at 6 years old, sitting on a small bed in a room full of other children. The orphanage, the long nights, waiting for someone to come and get him. Dominic squeezed his eyes shut, trying to push the memories away. But they came anyway, like a wave that couldn't be stopped. He remembered the first family that visited him, a young couple who spent a whole afternoon with him, playing, laughing. Dominic was sure they would take him home. He spent days dreaming of the room he would have, the family that would finally be his, but they never came back. Then came another couple, and another. Some didn't even talk to him much. Others seemed interested, but always chose another child. Dominic never knew why. He started to think there was something wrong with him. The nights were the worst, lying in the narrow bed, listening to the other boys sleep, imagining what it would be like to have a dad to teach him things, a mum to make dinner, a real family. Dominic sat up in bed, breathing heavily. He hadn't thought about this in years. He had built a good life, he had success, money. He had managed to forget that lonely boy he once was. But today, Seeing Ellie, it all came back. The feeling of being lost in the world, of not belonging anywhere, of waiting for someone to want to take care of you. She had asked if he could be her dad just for a day. And for a few hours he had been. He had felt useful, important. He had felt needed in a way he had never experienced before. Dominic got up and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. The apartment was completely silent. No children's laughter, no family noise, just the low hum of the refrigerator. He went back to his room and lay down again. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ellie pushing the bike away, disappearing down the street. The image left a strange ache in his chest, like something important was slipping through his fingers. He remembered when he was 8 and was finally adopted. Tom and Sarah were an older couple who couldn't have children. Dominic still remembered the day he arrived at their new home. It was smaller than this apartment, but it was full of love. Tom taught him how to ride a bike in the backyard, just like he had taught Ellie today. He held on tight, ran alongside, promised he wouldn't let go. And when Dominic finally managed to pedal on his own, Tom shouted with pride as if it were the greatest achievement in the world. "My son did it," Tom had shouted. "My son!" Dominic felt his eyes sting. Tom and Sarah had died in a car accident when he was in college. Since then, he had been alone again. He had built a career, saved money, bought nice things, but he had never built a family. Until today, in the park for a few hours, he had felt like a father. He had felt the pride that Tom had felt. He had experienced the unconditional love he had always wanted to give someone. And now Ellie was gone, taking that feeling with her. Dominic turned on his side and hugged his pillow. The clock on the nightstand read midnight. Tomorrow he had to work, to pretend it was a normal day. But he knew it wouldn't be, because now he had tasted what it was like to have someone to care for. He had felt the pure joy of seeing a child happy because of him. He had remembered what it was like to be important to someone. And he didn't want that feeling to end. He didn't want that day to be over forever. Maybe he could go back to the park tomorrow. Maybe Ellie would be there again. Maybe they could ride bikes a little more. Maybe she needed one more day with a borrowed dad. The truth was, Dominic needed it as much as she did. He closed his eyes and finally managed to relax. He had a plan for tomorrow. He would go back to the park. He would wait for her. And if Ellie showed up, if she wanted to, he could be her dad for another day, or maybe, just maybe, for longer than that. With that thought, Dominic finally fell asleep. And for the first time in years, he dreamed of a family. Dominic woke up before his alarm went off. All night, he had dreamed of Ellie. He dreamed she was lost in the city, looking for him. He dreamed he would never find her again. He got up quickly and went straight to the shower. He couldn't get the image of her pushing the rusty bike away, disappearing down the street, out of his head. Where had she slept? Was she safe? He had coffee, without paying attention to the taste. He could only think of one thing: getting to the park. He needed to know if she would be there. He left the house still early. It was only 8 in the morning, but he couldn't wait any longer. The walk to the park had never seemed so long. Dominic walked quickly, his heart pounding. What if she didn't show up? What if yesterday was just a chance encounter? When he arrived at the park, he looked in every direction. It was almost empty. A few morning joggers, an old man reading a newspaper, a woman walking her dog, but no sign of Ellie. Dominic felt a pang of disappointment. Maybe he had arrived too early. Maybe she wouldn't come today. He walked over to the tree where they had met yesterday, and then he saw her. Ellie was sitting on the same bench in the exact same spot. The bike was next to her, and she was hugging it as if it were a stuffed animal. She looked smaller today, more fragile. Her clothes were even dirtier than yesterday. When she looked up and saw him, something magical happened. Her face completely transformed. Her eyes lit up and she broke into a smile so big, so full of joy, that it seemed to illuminate the entire park. "You came back," she shouted, getting up from the bench. Dominic smiled back, feeling an enormous sense of relief. "Of course I came back. I promised I'd be your dad for today, remember?" Ellie ran to him, still pushing the bike. She looked as if she couldn't believe he was really there. "I thought you'd forgotten about me," she said, her voice a whisper. "I would never forget about you, Ellie." They walked together to the bench and sat down. Dominic noticed she looked tired. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her hair was messier than yesterday. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Ellie looked down and shook her head. "Not really." "Why not?" She was silent for a long moment, nervously wringing her hands. Dominic waited. He didn't want to force her to talk, but he felt she needed to. Finally, Ellie took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice so low he had to lean in to hear. "I live in a box behind a store," she said, not looking at him. "It's a big box, from a refrigerator. Someone threw it out and I made a bed inside with newspaper and cardboard." Dominic felt an icy chill run down his spine. A 6-year-old child living in a cardboard box. "I get scared when it rains," Ellie continued. "The box gets wet and cold. The water gets in everywhere. And there are strange noises at night. Other homeless people walk by and some of them are scary." She stopped talking and swallowed hard. "When everyone goes home at the end of the day, when the stores close and the streets get empty, I'm there, alone. I imagine what it would be like to have a real house, with a warm bed and someone to say goodnight to me." Dominic felt his heart ache so much it was a physical pain. He pictured Ellie alone in the cardboard box, scared, cold, hungry. A child who should be playing, going to school, being protected by a family. "How long have you been living like this?" he asked, his voice coming out hoarser than he intended. "I don't know. A long time. As long as I can remember." "And your parents?" Ellie shrugged. "I never had any, or I did, and they abandoned me. I don't remember. I've always lived on the street." Dominic clenched his fists. How was it possible for a child to live like this? How had no one helped her? For the first time in a long time, he wanted to do something that truly mattered. He no longer wanted to sell projects to companies or make money. He wanted to make a difference in Ellie's life. "Are you hungry now?" he asked. Ellie nodded, ashamed. "I'm always hungry," she admitted. Dominic stood up and extended his hand to her. "Come with me. We're going to fix this." Ellie looked at his hand, then at his face. Slowly, she placed her small, cold, and rough hand in his. "What about the bike?" she asked, worried. "Bring it with you." "We're not leaving it here." They left the park, Ellie pushing the bike with one hand and holding Dominic's with the other. He took her to the city center, where there were simple clothing stores. They entered a small, cozy shop. The saleswoman looked at them strangely. A well-dressed man with a dirty little girl, but Dominic ignored her. "She needs clothes," he said simply. The saleswoman looked at Ellie and her gaze softened. "Of course. What size does she wear?" 6 years old, Ellie said quietly. The saleswoman smiled at her and went to get some options. She brought back pants, t-shirts, a simple light blue dress, socks, shoes, and underwear. "Do you want to try on the dress?" the saleswoman asked gently. Ellie looked at Dominic as if asking for permission. He nodded. "You can try on anything you want." Ellie went to the fitting room with the dress. It took a few minutes, and when she came out, Dominic almost didn't recognize her. The dress was simple, but it transformed her. She looked like a normal little girl. "How is it?" the saleswoman asked. Ellie looked at herself in the mirror and her eyes filled with tears. "Is it really for me?" she asked, touching the fabric of the dress carefully. "It's for you," Dominic confirmed. "I've never had new clothes before," she said, her voice full of emotion. "I always wear clothes I find in the trash." Dominic bought all the clothes the saleswoman had picked out, plus a few extra t-shirts and a jacket for the cold. When they left the store, Ellie was still wearing the new dress. She held the bags with the other clothes in one hand and pushed the bike with the other. She couldn't stop looking down, admiring her outfit. "Thank you," she said, stopping on the sidewalk. "Thank you for everything." Dominic looked at her. She was beautiful in the new dress, but her face was still dirty and her hair was messy. She was still a street kid who would have to go back to her cardboard box at the end of the day, and he couldn't accept that. Ellie, he said, kneeling to be at her eye level. So I want to ask you an important question. She looked at him seriously. Would you like to come to my house, just for today, to take a bath, eat a real meal, sleep in a warm bed? Ellie's eyes widened. Really? Really? And the bike? Dominic smiled. You can bring it. It's not going anywhere. Ellie hugged the bike tightly. I want to, she whispered. I really want to. Dominic's apartment was a 20-minute walk away. During the walk, Ellie didn't stop talking. She told him about the places she knew in the city, about other homeless people she had met, about the dreams she had. I've always wanted to know what a real house looks like on the inside, she said. Sometimes I stand in front of houses at night, looking through the lit windows. I imagine how nice it must be to be inside, safe and warm. When they arrived at Dominic's building, Ellie was impressed. You live up there? She asked, looking at the tall building. On the 10th floor. Wow. They took the elevator up. Ellie held the bike with one hand and Dominic's hand with the other. Her eyes were wide, trying to take everything in. When Dominic opened the apartment door, Ellie stopped at the entrance. She didn't go in. She just stood there, looking inside as if it were a museum. You can come in, he said gently. Ellie took one small step inside, then another. She still held the bike firmly, as if it were her anchor in the world. She looked at everything in silence, the clean floor, the organized furniture, the dining table, the television, the plants on the balcony. She took a deep breath, smelling the air. It smells like coffee, she said, amazed. I made coffee before I left. Would you like some? Can kids drink coffee? Dominic laughed. You can have a little bit mixed with milk. Ellie was still standing in the middle of the living room, holding the bike. She seemed afraid to touch anything. You can bring the bike in, Dominic said. It's not going anywhere, it's safe here. Only then did Ellie relax. She leaned the bike against the wall carefully and smiled in relief. It's so clean, she said, looking around, and big and warm. Would you like to take a bath? Dominic asked. I have shampoo, soap, clean towels. Ellie's eyes sparkled. A hot bath. Very hot. Dominic took her to the bathroom and turned on the shower. The water came out hot immediately. Ellie held out her hand to feel it and laughed. Wow, it's really hot. He set out clean towels, shampoo and soap. He left the new clothes on the counter. Stay in there as long as you want. There's no rush. Ellie went into the bathroom and closed the door. Dominic heard the sound of the falling water and felt good. He imagined how nice it must be for her to have hot water after living on the streets for so long. While she was in the bath, Dominic went to the kitchen to prepare something for her to eat. He opened the refrigerator and saw he had chicken, rice, carrots, and potatoes. He decided to make a simple but nutritious meal. He cooked the rice, seasoned the chicken with salt and garlic, and sautéed the vegetables. The food filled the kitchen with a wonderful, homey smell. After 40 minutes, Ellie came out of the bathroom. She was unrecognizable. Her brown hair shone, clean and combed. Her skin was pink from the hot bath. The new dress made her look like a normal, happy child. How do you feel? Dominic asked. Different, she said, smiling. Clean. I smell nice, like the other kids. The steam from the hot water seemed to have dissolved some of the sadness she carried. Her eyes were brighter, more alive. Are you hungry? Very. Dominic called her to the kitchen. He served a plate with rice, chicken, and vegetables. Ellie sat at the table and looked at the food as if it were a miracle. Is this for me? She asked. All for you. She began to eat slowly, savoring each bite. She chewed carefully, as if she didn't want it to end. Is it good? Dominic asked. It's the best food I've ever had in my life, she said, her eyes shining. It's warm, and it tastes like home. Dominic felt a lump in his throat. When she finished the main course, he warmed up some milk and mixed it with cocoa powder. He served it in a small, colorful mug. Ellie held the mug with both hands, with the utmost care. Hot chocolate, she said, amazed. I've always wanted to try it. She took a small sip and closed her eyes. savoring it. "I've never eaten these things," she said quietly, looking at Dominic. "Warm rice, seasoned chicken, hot chocolate. Thank you." In that moment, Dominic felt something he had never felt before. His entire successful career, all the money he had earned, all his professional achievements. None of it mattered compared to Ellie's simple, sincere gratitude. That gratitude was worth more than anything he had ever achieved in his life, and he knew in that moment that he didn't want her to go back to the cardboard box. Not tonight. Maybe never again. The first light of day entered through the window of the room where Ellie had slept. She opened her eyes slowly, confused for a few seconds. Where was she? Why was the bed so soft? Why did it smell so clean? Then she remembered Dominic's house, the hot bath, the delicious food, the hot chocolate in a pretty mug. It hadn't been a dream. Ellie sat up in bed and looked around. The room was small but cozy. It had a single bed with clean sheets, a small desk, a window with blue curtains, and her bicycle was leaning against the wall, exactly where she had left it the night before. She smiled. It was still there. Everything was still real. She got up carefully, trying not to make any noise. She didn't know what time it was, but it seemed early. What if Dominic was still sleeping? What if she woke him up and he got angry? What if he changed his mind about letting her stay? Ellie walked to the door and opened it slowly. The hallway was quiet. She tiptoed out of the room, trying to find out where Dominic was. She followed the smell of coffee coming from the kitchen. When she reached the doorway, she saw him with his back to her, stirring something on the stove. He was dressed, neat, as if he had been awake for a while. Ellie stood in the doorway, unsure if she should enter. On the street, she always had to be careful. You never knew when someone would yell at you or tell you to leave. Dominic turned and saw her there, still in her nightgown, with her hair messy from sleep. His face lit up with a gentle smile. "Good morning," he said, his voice affectionate. "Did you sleep well?" Ellie nodded, but she hadn't said anything yet. She was testing his mood, seeing if he was still happy to have her there. "Are you hungry?" Dominic asked. She nodded again. "Great, I'm making scrambled eggs. Do you like eggs?" Ellie didn't know if she liked them. She had never had homemade scrambled eggs. But she nodded anyway. Dominic finished preparing breakfast and served 2 plates, scrambled eggs, 2 slices of toast, and a glass of orange juice for Ellie. For himself, black coffee. They sat at the kitchen table. Ellie ate slowly, still watching Dominic. He seemed relaxed, happy. He didn't seem to regret bringing her home. "Ellie," he said after a few minutes, "I need to tell you something." She stopped eating, her heart racing. This was it. Now he was going to tell her she had to leave. Dominic noticed the look of fear on her face. "It's nothing bad," he said quickly. "It's just that I need to work a little today." Ellie looked at him, confused. "So I work from home sometimes," he explained. "I have an office here. I'll be in there for a few hours, but I'm not leaving the apartment. I'll be right down the hall." He pointed down the hallway. "But if you need anything at all, you can call me. You can go there and knock on the door. You don't have to be shy." Ellie nodded, but she still looked worried. Dominic got up and went to a drawer. He came back with a notebook and a box of colored pencils. "I thought you might like this," he said, placing it on the table in front of her. Ellie looked at the notebook. It was new, with blank pages. The colored pencils were all sharpened, organized in the box. "For me?" she asked, touching the notebook carefully. "For you. You can draw whatever you want." Ellie opened the notebook and ran her hand over the first page. It was smooth, clean, full of possibilities. "I've never had a new notebook," she said quietly. Dominic felt that pang in his chest again. How could a 6-year-old have never had a new notebook? "Now you do," he said. "And you have pencils of every color." Ellie opened the box and looked at the pencils. Red, blue, green, yellow, purple, orange. There were more colors than she had ever seen together. "Can I draw anything?" "Anything you want." She picked up the red pencil and made a small mark on the page. Then she stopped and looked at Dominic. "Won't it run out?" The pencil. When it runs out, I'll buy another one. And the paper. When the notebook is full, I'll buy another notebook. Ellie smiled. It was the first time she had something she could use without worrying about it running out. Dominic looked around the kitchen, then at Ellie. "Oh," he said, as if remembering something important. "Course, there are cookies in the kitchen." He pointed to the counter where there was a glass jar full of cookies. "If you want one, you can have one. You can eat as many as you want. You don't need to ask for permission." Ellie looked at the jar. Through the glass, she could see round cookies with chocolate chips. "Can I really?" "You can. This is your home now. You can eat whatever you want, whenever you want." She gave a small smile. Her home. She had never had a home before. Dominic finished his coffee and stood up. "I'm going to the office now," he said. "But remember, if you need anything, just call me." Ellie nodded. "And Ellie?" She looked at him. "Welcome to your new home." Dominic left the kitchen and went to his office at the end of the hall. Ellie heard the door close softly. She was alone in the kitchen, with her new notebook, her colored pencils, and a jar full of cookies. It was still hard to believe that all of this was real. She got up from the table and went to the counter. She opened the cookie jar and took one. It was sweet, soft, with bits of chocolate that melted in her mouth. She ate it slowly, savoring it. Then she went to the living room, carrying the notebook and pencils. She sat on the couch, the same couch where Dominic had sat yesterday, and looked around. The room looked different during the day. Sunlight streamed in through the large window, illuminating everything. The furniture was simple but nice. There were green plants near the window. On the wall, pictures with beautiful landscapes. Ellie got up from the couch and began to explore. She walked with careful steps, as if in a museum. She touched the coffee table with her fingertips. She looked at the books on a small shelf. She examined the pictures on the wall. Everything was clean, organized, cared for. It was very different from the street, where everything was dirty, broken, abandoned. She went to the window and looked out. Down below, the city stretched out in all directions. Cars, small as toys, moved through the streets. People walked on the sidewalks, going to their jobs, their lives. Ellie wondered if some of those people had homes like this one, warm homes, with food in the fridge, with soft beds, with cookies in glass jars. She went back to the couch and opened her notebook. She picked up the red pencil and began to draw. First, she drew a house. A simple house, and with one door, two windows, and a chimney. Then she drew a little girl in front of the house. The girl was smiling. Ellie looked at the drawing. It was her. It was her house. Well, it wasn't really her house, but she was here, wasn't she? Dominic had said it was. She picked up the blue pencil and drew the sky, then green for the grass, yellow for the sun. She used all the colors, making the most beautiful drawing she could. When she finished, she held up the notebook and admired her work. It was the first drawing she had ever made with new colored pencils, on new paper, in a real house. She heard a noise coming from the office. Dominic typing on the computer, maybe. The sound reassured her. He was there working, but he was still close. Ellie lay down on the couch, hugging the notebook. The sunlight warmed her. The apartment was quiet, but it was a good quiet, a safe quiet. For the first time in her life, she felt at home. For the first time, she felt that no one was going to send her away, that she could relax, that she could stay. She closed her eyes and smiled. Maybe she could get used to this. Maybe she could learn to be a normal kid who had a house, who had someone to take care of her. Maybe she could learn to be happy. The sun continued to stream through the window, warming Ellie as she rested on the couch, holding her new notebook, feeling safe for the first time in her life. Dominic had been lying in bed for an hour, but he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about how different the day had been. Ellie had spent the morning drawing in her notebook, always looking down the hall to make sure he was still there. At lunch, she ate slowly, savoring every bite. In the afternoon, she had sat on the couch, flipping through a picture book he found in a drawer. It was strange having someone in the house. Good, but strange. Dominic caught himself smiling for no reason several times during the day. When he offered Ellie cookies and she asked if she could have two, he felt like telling her she could have the whole jar. He was almost asleep when he heard a quiet sound coming from the living room. It was like a sob or a whimper. Dominic was instantly alert. He heard it again. It was definitely crying. He got out of bed quickly but tried not to make any noise. He left his room and walked down the hall to the living room. The light from the street lamp outside came through the window, faintly illuminating the room. Ellie was sitting on the couch, curled up in a ball. She had her arms wrapped around her bicycle, hugging it to her chest. Her face was wet with tears that wouldn't stop falling. Dominic's heart tightened. She looked so small, so lost. Carefully, he approached. He didn't want to startle her. "Hey," he said softly. "What happened?" Ellie looked up at him. She was sobbing, her breath catching. I... She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out right. Dominic sat on the couch next to her, slowly. He didn't want to invade her space, man, but he wanted to be close enough to help. "Take a deep breath," he said gently. "There's no rush." Ellie tried to control her breathing. She sobbed a few more times before she could speak. "I dreamed I was all alone again," she said, her voice trembling. "I dreamed you were gone, that no one would find me, that I was back in the box and it was raining and it was cold." The tears started to fall heavily again. I dreamed that all of this was a lie, that I was going to wake up on the street again. Dominic felt a pain in his chest. He ran a hand through Ellie's hair, trying to calm her. "Shh," he said softly. "You're not alone. I'm here." "But you might leave," Ellie said between sobs. "Everyone leaves. No one stays with me." "I'm not going anywhere," Dominic said, continuing to stroke her hair. "I'm here. I won't leave you." Ellie leaned against him, still hugging her bicycle. Dominic could feel how much she was trembling. They stayed like that for a few minutes, in silence. Dominic continued to run his hand through her hair, just as his adoptive mother used to do when he had nightmares. When Ellie stopped trembling, Dominic took a deep breath. There was something he wanted to tell her, something that might help her understand that he knew exactly how she felt. "I wanted to tell you something," he said, his voice low. "So when I was little, I also lived in a place where kids waited for someone to come get them." Ellie looked up with teary eyes, staring at him. "I lived in an orphanage," Dominic continued. "I got there when I was 4 years old. My parents had died in a car accident." Ellie stopped crying, paying attention to the story. "In the orphanage, there were a lot of kids, all waiting for a family. Every week, couples would come to visit us. They would play with us, ask questions, watch us." Dominic paused for a moment, remembering those days, and every night I thought I would be there forever, that nobody wanted me, that there was something wrong with me. "Were you there for a long time?" Ellie asked, still sobbing a little. 2 years, Dominic said. 2 years of watching other kids get adopted while I was still there. I had nightmares, just like you did tonight. I dreamed I would grow up and become an adult, still in the orphanage." Ellie snuggled closer into his arm. "But one day a couple came," Dominic continued, smiling faintly at the memory. "Tom and Sarah. They were older than the other couples who visited. They had tried to have children for years but couldn't. Were they nice?" "Very nice. Tom had a beard and smiled a lot. Sarah smelled like cookies and always brought sweets for the children. They spent several afternoons at the orphanage, playing with me, talking to me." Dominic stopped stroking Ellie's hair and looked at her. "Do you know what they told me the day they came to get me?" Ellie shook her head. "They said that from the very first day they knew I was their son, that they were just waiting for the right time. And they changed my life completely." Ellie rested her head on his arm. "Were you scared too?" she asked quietly. "I was," Dominic said, being completely honest. "Very scared. Scared they would change their minds. Scared they would send me back. Scared it was all a dream, just like you dreamed tonight. And then the fear started to fade. Slowly. Tom taught me how to ride a bike in the backyard of our new house. Sarah made me hot chocolate every night before bed. They took me to school, helped me with my homework, took me to the doctor when I got sick. Dominic smiled. They made me feel like I belonged somewhere, like I had a real family. But did you still have nightmares? I did for a while. But Tom and Sarah always came when I cried. Sarah would stay with me until I fell back asleep, and little by little, the nightmares stopped. Ellie was quiet for a moment, processing the story. "Do you think," she began, but stopped. "Do I think what? Do you think I'll stop being scared too?" Dominic looked into her eyes. Even in the dark, he could see they were still full of tears, but now there was also hope. "I promise it will pass," he said, his voice firm. "And I promise that with you, it will pass too." "How do you know?" "Because I understand exactly how you feel. I've been where you are, and I know that with time and care we can feel safe again." Gradually, Ellie's crying subsided. Her breathing became calmer. She continued to hug the bicycle, but now she was also leaning on Dominic. "Will you stay with me until I fall asleep?" she asked. "I'll stay as long as you want." In that instant, Ellie realized something important. Dominic wasn't just being kind to her. He truly understood. He had gone through the same thing. He had felt the same fear, the same loneliness, the same terror of being abandoned. And if he had managed to get through it, maybe she could too. "Dominic." "Yes. Thank you for telling me about you. Now I know you understand." Dominic smiled in the dark. "I will always understand, Ellie, and I will always be here when you need me." She closed her eyes, finally relaxing. With Dominic's story in her head and the feeling that she wasn't alone in the world, the fear from the nightmare began to fade. For the first time, she believed that she might really be able to stay, that maybe Dominic wouldn't leave, that maybe she had finally found someone who truly wanted her. Dominic woke before the alarm went off. Not that he had slept much. After his conversation with Ellie in the middle of the night, he had been up late thinking about the story he told her, her tears, the fear he saw in her eyes. But today was different. Today he woke up with a strange feeling in his chest. It wasn't anxiety or worry. It was determination. He got out of bed and went to the living room. Ellie was still asleep on the couch, exactly where he had left her after she stopped crying. She was curled up, hugging her bicycle as always, but her face was peaceful, serene. Dominic approached slowly and sat in the armchair across from the couch. He just sat there, watching her. Ellie looked so small, so fragile. Her little hands held the bicycle's handlebars even in her sleep. Her hair was spread across the pillow. Her breathing was calm, gentle. For the first time since he met her, she didn't look like a scared child. She didn't look like someone always ready to run. She just looked like a 6-year-old girl sleeping peacefully. Dominic smiled. That small, fragile body, for the first time, seemed at peace. He continued to watch for a few more minutes. He thought about everything that had happened in the last few days. How Ellie had come into his life so unexpectedly. How she had changed everything. Before her, Dominic would wake up every morning without a real purpose. He worked, earned money, bought things, but there was no joy in it. There was no meaning. Now, he woke up wondering if Ellie had slept well, if she was hungry, if she needed anything. Her presence had filled the apartment with life in a way he never imagined possible. And last night, when he saw her crying, when he told her about his own past, Dominic realized something. He wasn't just helping a child in a difficult situation. He was falling in love with the idea of being a father. No, not just the idea. He was falling in love with being Ellie's father specifically. She stirred in her sleep, making a small noise. Dominic sat quietly, watching. But she didn't wake up. She just settled in more comfortably, still holding the bike. Dominic looked around the room. In the last few days, the atmosphere had completely changed. There were Ellie's drawings scattered on the coffee table. The coloring book he bought was on an armchair, a small cup in the kitchen sink. Traces that a child lived here, and he liked it. He liked it a lot. He had made a decision during the night while watching Ellie sleep after her nightmare, a decision that would change both of their lives forever. But first, He needed to be sure it was what she wanted, too. The sun began to stream through the window, illuminating Ellie's face. She blinked a few times, waking up slowly. When she opened her eyes completely and saw Dominic sitting in the armchair, she smiled. "Good morning," she said, her voice hoarse with sleep. "Good morning? Did you sleep better after?" Ellie nodded, sitting up on the couch but still hugging her bicycle. "I didn't have any more nightmares," she said. "So I think it was because of the story you told." Dominic smiled. "I'm glad to hear that." They were silent for a few seconds. Ellie watched him, trying to understand why he seemed different today. There was something in his gaze she couldn't identify. "Ellie," Dominic said finally, "come here. I want to talk to you." She looked at him with curiosity but got up from the couch. She leaned the bike against the wall and went to him. "Sit here with me," Dominic said, patting the spot on the couch next to where he had moved. Ellie sat down, her short legs dangling in the air. Dominic turned to face her. "Ellie," he began, "I've been thinking a lot." The smile vanished from her face. She became serious, alert. Whenever adults said they had been thinking a lot, it was because they were about to say something bad. Dominic noticed the change in her expression and held her small hands in his. "It's nothing bad," he said quickly. "It's just that I wanted to ask you something important." Ellie looked him in the eyes but still seemed worried. Her body tensed up. "What kind of question?" she said, her voice a whisper. Dominic took a deep breath. He looked at her small hands in his. He thought of all the empty mornings he had lived before meeting her. He thought of all the lonely dinners, all the silent nights. He thought of how she had filled his life with purpose in just a few days. "Ellie," he said, looking directly into her eyes, "I wanted to ask you something important." She swallowed hard. Her heart began to beat faster. This was it. Now he was going to say she had to leave, that it had been nice, but she couldn't stay forever. "Cass, would you let me?" Dominic began and then paused. Ellie held her breath. "Would you let me be your real dad?" She blinked, confused. She hadn't understood. "Not just for today," Dominic continued, "but forever, if you want." For a second, Ellie seemed not to have heard correctly. Her face showed total confusion. She tilted her head to the side, like a puppy trying to understand a new command. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I want to adopt you," Dominic said, being more direct. "I want you to be my real daughter, forever. I want this to be your home, your family. I want to take care of you until you grow up." The words took a few seconds to make sense in Ellie's head. When she finally understood, her eyes filled with tears. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of a happiness so immense it couldn't be contained. A smile slowly appeared on her face. It started small, but grew until it took over her entire face. "Really?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "Really?" Dominic replied, smiling too. "Shall you want to be my real dad forever?" "I do, very much. And I can stay here forever. This will be my real home. If you want it to be, yes." Ellie couldn't hold back any longer. She jumped from the couch right into Dominic's lap, throwing her arms around his neck. "I want to," she cried, hugging him with all her might. "See, I really, really want to." Dominic hugged her back, feeling her little heart beating fast against his chest. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, it was just the two of them there, holding each other. He felt his heart and hers beating in the same rhythm, as if they were finally complete. "I've always wanted a dad," Ellie whispered in his ear. "I've always dreamed of it. And I've always wanted a daughter," Dominic whispered back. "I just didn't know it was you I was waiting for." They stayed like that for a long time, just hugging. Dominic felt something inside him click into place, as if a piece that had always been missing had finally been found. There, holding Ellie in his arms, hearing her repeat, "Really? Really?" Between tears of happiness, Dominic knew with absolute certainty that he had made the best decision of his life. He was no longer just a lonely man helping a child in need. He was a father who had found his daughter, and a daughter who had found her father. And finally, after years of emptiness, They had both found a family. In the days following the adoption request, Dominic began the official process. He had no idea how much bureaucracy was involved in adopting a child. He thought it would be simple. He wanted to be a father. Ellie wanted to have a father. Done. But the system didn't work that way. On the first morning, he called a lawyer specializing in family law. The man explained that it would be a long process with several steps. First, he would need to gather personal documents. Then, he would go through interviews. A social worker would visit his home. There would be reports, analyses, approvals. "How long does it take?" Dominic asked. "It depends. It could take a few months," the lawyer replied. "A few months." Dominic sighed. Ellie was anxious to have an official family, so was he, but he would have to be patient. He began to gather the documents: birth certificate, proof of income, criminal background check, medical exams. The list seemed endless. Each paper required a trip to a different office, hours of waiting in lines. Ellie noticed something was happening. She saw Dominic leaving with folders full of papers, returning with more papers, talking on the phone about the adoption process, documentation, legal requirements. "What is all this?" she asked one afternoon, pointing to the table full of forms. "These are the papers to make you my daughter officially," Dominic explained. "Joyce, why do you need so many papers?" Dominic smiled. It was a fair question, because when someone wants to adopt a child, they have to prove they can take good care of them, that they have a good home, enough money, that they are a responsible person. Ellie frowned. "But you already take good care of me." "I know. But the government needs to be sure." She nodded, but Dominic could see she was worried. Maybe thinking that if so many papers were involved, it might not work out. For 2 weeks, Dominic filled out forms. He answered questions about his childhood, his education, his relationships, his finances. Some questions were invasive, personal, but he answered everything patiently, thinking of Ellie. Finally, the lawyer called. "Everything is approved so far," he said. "Now comes the next step. A social worker will visit you at home." Dominic's heart sped up. "When?" "Next week, Thursday morning." Dominic hung up the phone and went to find Ellie. She was in the living room, drawing in her notebook. "Ellie," he said, sitting next to her, "I need to tell you something." She put down her colored pencil and looked at him. "A woman is coming here to talk with us. It's part of the process for you to become my daughter." "What kind of woman?" "A social worker. It's her job to check if children are okay, if they're happy, if they're safe." Ellie was quiet for a moment. "What if she doesn't like me?" "She'll like you. How could she not like you?" But Dominic could see that Ellie was worried. In the following days, she became more clingy. She asked several times if he was sure the woman wouldn't take her away. "It's just a conversation," Dominic would repeat. "She just wants to make sure you're happy here." On Thursday morning, Dominic woke up early. He helped Ellie pick out an outfit, the blue dress they had bought on the first day. He carefully combed her hair, making 2 small braids. "I'm nervous," Ellie confessed as he fixed her hair. "Me too," Dominic admitted. "But it's going to be fine." The social worker arrived promptly at 9 o'clock. She was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and a kind smile. She carried a folder and a clipboard. When Ellie saw her sitting in the living room, her eyes filled with fear. Dominic could feel the tension in her body. The woman smiled gently. "Hi, Ellie. I'm Claire. I'm just here to talk with you both for a little bit." Ellie hid behind Dominic, holding his hand. Claire noticed the girl's nervousness. "You don't need to be afraid," she said softly. "I'm not going to do anything bad. I just want to know how you are." Ellie squeezed Dominic's hand so tightly her fingers turned red. In a faint voice, she asked, "Is she going to take me away?" Dominic's heart ached. He knelt down to her eye level. "No one is going to take you away," he said firmly. "I promised you would stay, and you will." Claire observed the interaction between them and made a note on her clipboard. "May I sit here?" she asked, pointing to the couch. Dominic nodded. He and Ellie sat on the couch next to her, with Ellie practically glued to him. The conversation started slowly. Claire asked simple questions about Ellie's routine, what her days were like, what she liked to do, if she slept well. Even so, Ellie didn't let go of Dominic's hand throughout the entire conversation. "Do you feel safe here?" Claire asked. Ellie nodded, but looked at Dominic as if seeking confirmation that it was true. "And do you like living with Dominic?" "I like it a lot," Ellie said quietly. "What do you do together?" "He taught me how to ride a bike. He makes yummy food. He gives me hot chocolate. He bought me colored pencils." Each of Ellie's answers was accompanied by an anxious glance at Dominic, as if she needed his confirmation that all of it was true and wasn't going to end. Claire asked more questions about school. Dominic had already enrolled Ellie. About the doctor, they had already been to the pediatrician. About friends, she hadn't made any yet but was starting to play with kids in the park. "Do you want to keep living here, Ellie?" Claire finally asked. "I do," Ellie answered immediately. "Forever." Claire smiled and made one last note. "And you, Dominic, how do you feel about being a father?" "It's the best thing that's ever happened to me," he answered without hesitation. After an hour, Claire closed her folder and stood up. "She's a very sweet girl," she said, smiling at Ellie. "I'll prepare the report. You two seem to have found each other." Dominic walked Claire to the door. When she left, he returned to the living room and found Ellie still sitting rigidly on the couch. Only after the door closed completely did Ellie take a deep breath, as if only then, believing she was still there. "She's gone," she said, as if she couldn't believe it. "She's gone," Dominic confirmed. "I thought," Ellie began, her voice trembling. "So I thought they were going to take me away." Dominic sat next to her and pulled her into a tight hug. "Never again," he said firmly. "No one will ever take you away from me again." Ellie snuggled into his arms, finally relaxing. "Promise?" "I promise. You're my daughter now, and no one can change that." For the first time since Claire arrived, Ellie smiled. "When will I be your official daughter?" "Soon," Dominic promised. "Very soon." Dominic was in the kitchen making coffee when the phone rang. It was a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after the social worker's visit. He answered it casually, expecting a client or maybe the bank. "Dominic, this is Mr. Miller, your lawyer." Dominic's heart immediately started to race. For the past few days, he had tried not to think too much about the process. He didn't want to get his hopes up only to be disappointed. But now, hearing the lawyer's voice, all the anxiety came rushing back. "Mr. Miller, good morning," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I have some good news for you," the lawyer said, and Dominic could hear the smile in his voice. "The process has been approved. All steps have been successfully completed. Ellie is officially and legally your daughter." Dominic had to lean on the kitchen counter. His legs felt weak. After weeks of endless paperwork, interviews, visits, and constant anxiety, it had finally happened. "Are you absolutely sure?" he asked, still unable to fully believe it. "Aren't you completely sure? The documents arrived yesterday afternoon. Ellie Helena Jones is now Ellie Helena Evans. The adoption certificate is ready. Congratulations, Dad." When he hung up the phone, he stood there for several minutes, absorbing the magnitude of the news. Ellie was his daughter, legally, officially, forever. No one could separate them. He heard small, familiar footsteps coming down the hall. Ellie appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her pink pajamas, with her hair messy from sleep. "Good morning, Dad," she said naturally, a word that had become more common in recent weeks. Dominic looked at her and felt his chest swell with emotion. Now she could officially call him Dad. "Ellie," he said, kneeling to be at her eye level. "Do you want to know something very special?" She looked at him curiously, still sleepy, but sensing something different in his tone of voice. "What is it?" "It's all done," he said, the words coming out slowly because he wanted her to understand the importance of the moment. "You are now my real daughter." "How officially?" Ellie blinked a few times, trying to process the information through her sleepiness. "What do you mean, for real?" "The man on the phone told me that all the papers were approved by the judge. You are Ellie Evans now, my daughter, forever and ever. For a second, she seemed not to fully understand. Then, slowly, like the rising sun, the information sank in. Her eyes widened. "Does that mean—" she began. "It means no one can ever separate us again. You're my real daughter now." Ellie covered her mouth with both small hands, as if she couldn't believe it. Her eyes filled with tears, but Dominic could see it was completely different from the other times. They weren't tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of pure relief. "No one can take me away now?" she asked, her voice muffled by her hands. "No one. Never again. You're mine forever. And I can call you Dad without being afraid." "You can. I'm your real dad now. And you're my real daughter." Tears began to stream down her face, but she was smiling at the same time. "Dad," she said, testing the word with a newfound confidence. "My real dad." Dominic pulled her into a tight hug, feeling her small body tremble with emotion. "My daughter," he said in her ear. "My daughter forever." They held each other like that for several minutes, until Ellie pulled away and wiped her tears. "Does this mean I have a real family now?" "It means you've always had a family. Now it's just on paper too." Ellie let out a little giggle that turned into a real laugh. "Do you know what we're going to do today?" Dominic asked. She shook her head, still smiling. "We're going to celebrate. It's a special day, the day you officially got a family." "How are we going to celebrate?" Dominic thought for a moment. He wanted it to be special, but also something Ellie would like. "First," he said, "we're going to get dressed up nicely. Then, we're going to have lunch at a very special place." "What place?" Dominic smiled. "Remember that little diner near the park? The one you always stop to look at when we pass by?" Ellie's eyes lit up like stars. "Sorry, the one with the checkered tablecloths and the flowers in the window." "That's the one. I've always wanted to go in there," she said, jumping with excitement. "I always look through the window and imagine what it must be like inside." "Today you'll find out, and after that we have another surprise." "What surprise?" Dominic laughed. "If I tell you, it won't be a surprise." An hour later, they were ready to go out. Dominic wore a light blue dress shirt and nice pants. Ellie chose the blue dress, which had become her lucky dress, and shiny black shoes. "Do I look pretty?" she asked, looking at herself in the mirror. "The prettiest girl in the whole wide world," Dominic replied. "And you look very handsome too, Dad." They walked together through the streets. It was a beautiful autumn day with the sun shining and a gentle breeze. Ellie walked beside Dominic, holding his hand, but now it was different. It wasn't the desperate grip of someone afraid. It was simply a daughter walking with her father. "Dad," she said, "can I tell people that you're my real dad now? You can tell the whole world if you want to." When they arrived in front of the diner, Ellie stopped as she always did and looked through the window. But today, for the first time, Dominic opened the door. "Let's go in," he said. Ellie entered slowly, holding his hand, and looked at everything as if it were magical. The diner was small and cozy, with wooden tables covered in red and white checkered tablecloths. Small vases with flowers decorated each table. The smell of home-cooked food hung in the air. "It's even prettier on the inside than I imagined," she whispered, amazed. The waiter led them to a perfect table by the window. Ellie could see the street, but now she was on the inside, just as she had always wanted. "Is this your first time here?" the waiter asked. "It is," Dominic replied. "We're celebrating something very special. What would you like to order?" Ellie studied the menu with total concentration, pointing to a picture of a hamburger. "That," she said decisively. "Hamburger with French fries," Dominic read. "Excellent choice. And to drink." "Do you have chocolate milkshakes?" she asked hopefully. "We sure do. It's a house specialty," the waiter said, smiling. "Then a chocolate milkshake." When the food arrived, Ellie was impressed. The hamburger was big, with lettuce, tomato, and melted cheese dripping down the side. The fries were golden and crispy. The milkshake came in a tall glass with whipped cream and a cherry. Can I eat all of this?" "You can eat all of it. It's your celebration lunch for our family." Ellie ate with pleasure, smiling between bites. She would stop to look out the window, to smile at Dominic. It was clear she was storing every moment in her memory. "Dad," she said suddenly. "Yes, sweetie." "Thank you for bringing me here. It's even better than I imagined. And thank you for being my real dad." Dominic felt his eyes sting. "Thank you for being my daughter." After lunch, they walked to a bicycle shop in the city center. Ellie had asked about her old bike several times. Dominic always said it was stored away, but he had a surprise planned. "Where are we going now?" she asked, curious. "You'll see." When they entered the shop, Ellie's eyes widened. There were bicycles of all sizes and colors, small ones for kids, big ones for adults, red, blue, yellow, pink. The shop owner approached them. "Can I help you?" Dominic knelt beside Ellie. "Today you're going to pick out a new bicycle," he said. "Anyone you want. It's your celebration gift." "Can I really pick anyone?" "Anyone. The one you like the most." She began to walk through the store as if she were in a museum of treasures. She carefully touched the colorful handlebars. She stopped in front of a pink one with flowers. Then she looked at a shiny red one. She tested the bell on a yellow one. At the back of the store, she found a light blue bicycle. It was simple but elegant. It had a small basket on the front and a golden bell on the handlebar. "This one," she said, pointing decisively. "Are you sure? Don't you want to look a little more?" Ellie touched the little basket lovingly. "I'm sure I can keep special things in here. And blue is the color of the sky. It's the color of freedom." The shop owner adjusted the height to fit Ellie. She got on the bike and tested the reach of the pedals. Perfect. She rang the golden bell, and it made a crystal clear sound that made her laugh. While Dominic paid, Ellie stood beside the bike, hugging the handlebars, like someone who was finally sure they could belong somewhere. This time, there was no fear that someone would take her bike. It was truly hers, bought by her real father. "Can we go to the park?" she asked when they left. "Of course. That's where I was thinking of going." "To our park?" "To our park." They walked to the park, where it had all begun. It was late afternoon and the sun was low, painting the sky in gold and pink. There were a few families on the grass, children playing on the playground equipment. Dominic took the bike to the flat area where he had first taught Ellie to pedal, the same place where it all started. "Remember the first few tries?" he asked, holding the bike as she got on. Ellie laughed, a musical sound. "I remember. I was so scared of falling and scared that you would leave. And now I'm not scared of anything, because you're my real dad and I'm your real daughter." It was absolutely true. This time, as Ellie prepared to pedal, there was no fear of losing anything. There was no fear that the bike would be taken away. There was no fear that Dominic would leave. She was his daughter now, officially, forever. She tried to pedal and wobbled a bit, but she didn't fall. She tried again, went further. On the third try, she managed to balance and pedaled on her own for a long distance. "I did it," she shouted, with pure happiness. "I really did it." Dominic clapped enthusiastically and smiled, proud. It was the same joy as the first time, but amplified, because now she was officially his daughter doing something that made her happy. Ellie rode lap after lap around the park. Each pedal stroke was more confident. She would stop to ring the bell, smile at Dominic, wave at other children. Some waved back. An elderly lady walking her dog stopped and watched Ellie pedaling with so much joy. She approached Dominic with a friendly smile. "What a lovely little girl," she commented. "She's so happy." "Is she your daughter?" Dominic looked at Ellie pedaling freely through the park, her hair flying in the wind, her laughter echoing in the air, the blue bicycle shining under the golden sun. He smiled with all the love in the world and answered without hesitation, "Yes, she's my daughter." In that instant, something was definitively complete within him. He was no longer a lonely man pretending to be a father. He was a father watching his daughter play in the park where they met. Everything that was make-believe had become real forever. As the sun began to set, Ellie stopped pedaling and came running to Dominic, her face flushed with happiness. "Dad," she said, using the word with total naturalness, Say, can I take my bike home? Of course, it's your home, it's your bike, it's your family. She smiled and took his hand. Let's go home then. To our home. Let's go home. And they walked together, official father and daughter, towards the apartment that was now officially home to them both. Ellie pushed her new bike alongside Dominic, talking about everything that had happened on that perfect day. It was the day of a new beginning, for both of them, forever.